Hi everyone, this is Amy Johnson-Crow, and welcome to this week's Archives.com live stream. This week, our topic is Where in the World? Finding Your Ancestors' Origins. Now, one of the best tools that we can use for finding our ancestors' origins is the census. Because not only will it tell us about a specific person and where they were born, but it's a great resource for actually tracing the migration of an entire family, because we can see the complete household. And it's also important to remember that with the census, information can vary over time. Now, that's because of two things. First, the questions that were asked changed from census year to census year. And another thing to keep in mind is that you never know exactly who gave the information to the census taker. So it's important to look at this information over a span of census years. That's why I always recommend that for all of your ancestors, you should find them in every census in which they should appear, because you never know what you're going to find in any given census record, because that information can vary over time. So let's take a look at an example. Now this is the Theodore Goble family, and they were living in Indiana in 1900. And we can see here at the top that Theodore Goble was born in 1840 in Germany. His wife, and I know I am going to horribly butcher her name, Kunigund, was born in 1850, also in Germany. And we see the children born, daughter Anne, born in 1879 in Indiana, and the rest of the children are also listed as being born in Indiana. So hey, we now have information that the father and the mother were born in Germany. Well, that's great, to a point. Germany is a pretty big place. And if we are wanting to do more research back in Germany, we're really going to need a better idea of where. We have to have a way of narrowing it down. So remember what I said a moment ago about the census and how it changed over time and how that information can vary. We see that a lot when people are reporting birthplaces in present-day Germany. Germany as an entire country really isn't that old. Even into the 1800s, we see what we think of as Germany today as sort of a loosely affiliated group of regions. So if we look at this Theodore Goble family that we have here in 1900 and compare that to the census in 1880, we have Theodore and his wife, but instead of being reported as being born in Germany, Theodore has his birthplace listed as Prussia. His wife's birthplace is listed as Hesse-Darmstadt. So now we've gone from Germany as a great big country, now we have some specific regions where we can start looking. And as another reason to find a family every census in which they should appear, another reason, you never know who else is going to be in the household. As we take a look here in this 1880 census, we also have down here at the bottom Caspar Gohlhauser, who's listed as the father-in-law. So that makes him her father, Kunigund's father. He is also listed as being born in Hesse-Darmstadt. So we not only have birthplaces now for two generations of this family, but we also have the name of her father. So presumably that is her maiden name. So now this is giving us some really good information that we can look at when we are going to go across the pond and start doing some research in present-day Germany. So again, taking a look at that census over a period of census years, don't stop at just one and be satisfied. Go back and find that family in all of the censuses in which they should appear. Also, find the full family in the census. It's very easy and it's very tempting to find your ancestor in a census, and then you go back a couple census years, you skip a couple, and you find that ancestor with their parents, and that's it. But look for all of those censuses so that you can get as many of the children in the household as possible. And look at all of the children's birthplaces for clues to migration, not only about where the parents were born, but also as that family moves across the United States. Case in point, the Henry Pyle family in 1880 was living in Iowa. And the 1880 census shows us that Henry was born in England, his wife Elsie was born in New York, daughter May was born in Michigan, daughter Helen was born in Iowa, and son John was born in Iowa. So if we are trying to trace this family back, let's say that we're trying to find where Henry and Elsie were married, and we're not finding a marriage record for them in this county in Iowa. Well, take a look at that oldest daughter, who was born in 1869 in Michigan. Could Henry and Elsie have been living in Michigan when they got married? And we can also pinpoint more when they're making their moves across the country. We know from the census that they're in Iowa by 1880. We have them in Iowa by 1872. They were in Michigan in 1869. So we have this family moving from Michigan to Iowa sometime between about 1869 and 1872. That could also explain if we can't find this family living in Iowa in the 1870 census. Are they still back in Michigan? Again, taking a look at the children in the household and looking at their birthplaces to be able to pinpoint when and where that family is moving across the country. We'll give you some very good clues of where to look for more records. Don't forget death records. Now, the thing about death records is that when it comes to the birth information, a death record is typically recorded much, much later after the birth has occurred. So the person giving the information may not know exactly all of the details about the birth of the deceased. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't look at them, but we can use them for very good clues. Now here we have a death certificate for Gaetano Faiola, who died in Mahoning County, Ohio in 1933. And his birthplace is listed as Frosinone, Italy. So we see him on the census as birthplace of Italy, but now we have a specific town in Italy. And the informant, you might have noticed that Gaetano is unmarried, but it turns out that the informant is his brother. So ostensibly the brother knows where he was born. So this could be a very, very good clue if we want to pick up that research back in Italy. Now we have a specific town where we can start looking. So those are civil death records, but there are other types of death records that we should look at as well. If your ancestor was affiliated with a church, oftentimes churches would keep their own death records, whether it was a death record or a burial record. So here we have an example from the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, a collection that is found on archives.com. And we have this, it's actually a burial record for Maria Dow GEB is a German abbreviation for born. So we have Maria Dow, born Priest, born April 6, 1847 in Holstein. So again, even though the census is telling us she's born in Germany, now we have a more specific area where we can start looking. And it's giving us the maiden name, which is a very, very good clue. So again, even if you have found that civil death record from the courthouse or the health department or whatever jurisdiction is responsible for recording those vital records in the area, consider, are there church records that might have also been created at the same time as the death, whether it's a church death record or a burial record, as we have here. They can be very, very detailed. And of course, obituaries. Now, here's an example from a newspaper called the Custer County Republican from the 9th of December, 1909. And it's the obituary for Mrs. Sarah Dent. And it reports that she was born in Ohio, 1862. And you might be thinking, well, Amy, that really doesn't tell me anything beyond what I could have already picked up in the census. But look what other details we have about her migration, about her origins. It says that in childhood, she moved to Red Oak, Iowa with her parents, and that she had only been a resident of Broken Bow, Nebraska for the past 9 years. So if we had seen a lot of her children being born in Iowa, but we didn't know where, should we be looking in the area around Red Oak? Again, we have her migration, so we can see she's born in Ohio. In childhood, she moves to Red Oak, Iowa, and then sometime around 1900, she moves to Broken Bow, Nebraska. So this gives us clues not only for how she migrated, but possibly also how her children migrated. Were her children born in the area around Red Oak, Iowa? It's a good question to keep in mind as we're trying to find more records. And also, thinking about finding more clues, we can also find more clues in the census. Now, here's a little bit more of that census record we saw earlier, the 1900 census for Theodore Goble and his wife. If you scroll over to the right-hand side in the 1900 through 1930 censuses, it asked for the year of immigration to the United States. So this is going to do several things for us. First, it's going to give us more places on their timeline, so we can see when they exactly came into the United States. Now, it doesn't mean that Theodore went directly to Indiana. He might have been in a couple other places in between, but we have him arriving in the United States in 1852, in 1851, and his wife immigrated in 1852. So we have more points on their timelines, and it also gives us more information. So when we want to start looking perhaps for passenger records, now we have it narrowed down. Just a couple of tips about once you start working in naturalization records. Now, a lot of people want to make that jump as soon as they find that their ancestor was born in someplace other than the United States. They want to, boom, go right into naturalization records. Couple of things to keep in mind. Before 1906, naturalization records actually have very little specific information. They will typically say something like, this person is a subject of the Queen of England, or it'll give a very specific, or it'll give a very general country, but it won't give a place of birth. It won't give their town of origin or anything like that. Now, beginning in 1906, we start seeing much more information, much more detailed, including specific birthplaces. So if you're like me and all of your ancestors came to the United States fairly early and, they're all naturalized, long before 1900, naturalization records probably aren't going to give you the information that you're hoping for if you're hoping to find specific birthplaces, or at least specific towns where they came from. However, if you have ancestors who are more recent immigrants to the United States, and they would have been naturalized in 1906 or later, definitely look for those naturalization records because they can be very detailed and give some very specific information. So, to just sort of recap what we've covered, take a look in the census and make sure that you're following that ancestor all the way through all of the censuses, not only to see how the information for that ancestor changes, but also to pick up clues from all of the children so that you can plot the family's migration across the United States. Take a look at all of those death records, both the ones that are recorded at the courthouse and the ones that would have been recorded at the church. And definitely take a look at those obituaries. They can be wonderful sources of all sorts of information, not only about immigration and birthplaces, but also just about anything about that person could appear in their obituary. All right, next week, and we kind of alluded to it a couple times today. Next week's topic, forget sibling rivalry. Get answers from your ancestors' siblings. Sometimes we get really focused on our ancestor and we sometimes put blinders on to the rest of the family. Well, next week we're going to talk about how we can research your ancestors' brothers and sisters to try to get more answers about your ancestor. So again, forget sibling rivalry, get answers from your ancestors' siblings. That will be next Wednesday at this same time, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. In the meantime, stay connected with archives.com, whether it's on our blog, liking us on Facebook, following us 140 characters at a time at archives.com on Twitter, and also I encourage everyone to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can see the address right there. When you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you'll get an email every time that we upload new videos. So, great way to stay connected with all of the learning opportunities that you can get from archives.com. So until next week, this is Amy Johnson Crow wishing you happy researching.